All right, let's jump right into it. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of Bitcoin accumulation. And honestly, some of the sources we've got lined up paint a pretty wild picture of the future.
Definitely captivating stuff. And yeah, maybe a little concerning for some, but that's why we're here, right? To break it all down.
Exactly. We're talking about a potential future where Bitcoin becomes incredibly valuable, like really valuable.
Right.
And the average person, well, they might just miss out.
Yeah, that's the core of it, isn't it? Awareness and action, or the lack thereof.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to be unpacking some pretty big moves like Tether going on a Bitcoin buying spree.
That's right. Those recent purchases were massive.
And we can't forget about the shrinking Bitcoin reserves on exchanges like Coinbase. It's getting kind of scarce out there.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. And then there's the whole geopolitical angle, with countries like Russia apparently using Bitcoin to their advantage.
That's right, navigating sanctions and all that. So the big question we're tackling today is this.
Mm.
Are we on the brink of a massive wealth transfer
Uh-huh.
where most people are left behind?
Big question, with potentially big consequences.
No doubt. Let's start with Tether, the company behind that stablecoin, USDT.
Right. The one pegged to the US dollar.
Now, they just bought nearly 8,000 Bitcoin,
Huge purchase.
bringing their total holdings to over 82,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely raised some eyebrows. I mean, we're talking about a company that issues a stable coin, supposedly stable, going all in on Bitcoin.
Exactly. So the question is why? Why would a stablecoin issuer be hoarding so much Bitcoin?
Well, it seems like a pretty strong vote of confidence in Bitcoin's future, wouldn't you say?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to interpret it any other way, but what's the thinking behind it?
A lot of analysts see it as a hedge, a way to protect themselves against instability in the traditional financial system.
Interesting. So they're basically betting on Bitcoin to hold its value or even increase in value.
Exactly. And some even speculate that it's a strategic move to diversify their reserves and potentially profit from Bitcoin's price appreciation down the line.
So it's not just about protecting themselves. It's about positioning themselves for potential gains.
Possibly, yeah.
And here's the thing. Our source claims that Tether isn't alone.
Right. It's not just a few big players anymore.
They say that companies and individuals are buying Bitcoin over the counter.
Meaning they're bypassing those public exchanges.
Exactly. Big private deals happening behind the scenes.
Which, of course, raises the question, why all the secrecy?
Yeah, what's the advantage of doing it this way?
Well, for one, it avoids the whole price slippage issue. When you make massive purchases on public exchanges, you can actually drive the price up with your own buying.
So by going over the counter, they can get a better price, maybe even negotiate a discount.
Exactly. And then there's the privacy factor. Some buyers just prefer to keep their transactions under wraps.
Makes sense. Less scrutiny, less attention.
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. Our source argues that this is all part of a massive wealth transfer happening right under our noses.
Yeah, they're saying that most people are completely oblivious to what's going on.
And they're challenging that whole idea of Bitcoin abundance. You
Yeah.
know, the idea that there's plenty to go around.
Right, right. They point to the dwindling Bitcoin reserves on exchanges like Coinbase as proof that the supply is actually shrinking.
And that's significant, you know? When more and more Bitcoin is held in private wallets, the liquidity on exchanges drops.
Meaning there's less Bitcoin available to buy and sell.
Exactly. And if demand keeps rising, well, that could lead to a supply squeeze.
Prices go up, and suddenly it's even harder for the average person to get their hands on some Bitcoin.
That's the potential scenario they're painting, yeah.
So let's say these big players keep gobbling up Bitcoin. What happens to someone who wants to buy, just a fraction of a coin?
Well, that's where it gets a little worrying, I guess you could say.
Yeah, our source paints this picture of a future where Bitcoin becomes the dominant form of wealth.
Like the asset to have.
And it's only accessible to those who got in early.
The Bitcoin elite, basically.
Yeah, and they even cite Fidelity's prediction that Bitcoin could reach $1 billion per coin by 2038.
Billion with a B.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Mm.
$1 billion per coin. Is that even remotely realistic?
I mean, it sounds crazy, right? But when you look at Bitcoin's historical price trajectory and factor in its scarcity, well, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
So you're saying it's not impossible?
Not impossible. Remember, the total supply of Bitcoin is capped at 21 million coins, and a big chunk of that is already held by long-term investors who are unlikely to sell anytime soon.
So even if you only own a fraction of a Bitcoin,
A tiny slice.
it could theoretically be worth a fortune in the future.
That's the bet, yeah.
But let's think about that future for a second. What happens if Bitcoin really does become incredibly valuable? What does that mean for society as a whole?
Well, that's where our source raises some serious concerns about a widening wealth gap.
Right, between the Bitcoin has and the have-nots.
Exactly. They argue that those who don't own any Bitcoin could be left at a huge disadvantage in a future where it dominates the economy.
So it's not just about missing out on potential profits, it's about being excluded from the entire system.
Yeah, that's the potential dystopian scenario they're outlining.
A future divided by Bitcoin ownership.
Yeah, it's pretty stark.
But there's another twist in this whole narrative. Our source also mentions governments getting involved in Bitcoin, specifically Russia.
Right, that caught my eye too. Apparently, they've been quietly mining and accumulating Bitcoin.
And the speculation is that they're using it to circumvent sanctions, to reduce their reliance on the US dollar.
It's a fascinating development, isn't it? Bitcoin, this decentralized technology, being used as a tool in geopolitical power plays.
It really makes you wonder what the future holds. If Russia's doing it, who else might be following their lead?
Exactly. This whole thing has the potential to reshape not just finance, but global power dynamics as well.
So we're talking about individual wealth, national strategies, and the future of the global financial system. A lot to unpack here.
A lot to unpack indeed.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll dive even deeper into these questions.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around. We've got these massive players making big moves, governments getting in on the action, and this potential future where Bitcoin reshapes everything.
And in the midst of all that, you've got the average person trying to figure out what it all means for them.
Right, exactly. Where do you even begin?
That's the question, isn't it? It's easy to get overwhelmed by all the noise and complexity.
It really is. But I think the most important thing is to just start with education. Before you even think about investing in anything, take some time to understand what Bitcoin is, how it works.
The basics, basically.
Exactly. Learn about blockchain technology, the concept of decentralization, how transactions actually happen. There are tons of resources out there that break it down in simple terms.
So you don't need to be a tech whiz or a finance guru to get started.
Not at all. There are websites, podcasts, online courses designed specifically for beginners. The key is to approach it with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
Curiosity is key, right?
Absolutely. Once you have a basic understanding, you can start thinking about the practicalities, like how do you actually acquire Bitcoin?
Okay, so let's say we've done our homework, we're ready to dip our toes in. What's the next step?
Well, you'll need to choose an exchange. That's a platform where you can buy and sell Bitcoin.
Kind of like a brokerage for stocks.
In a way, yeah. But it's important to choose a reputable exchange, one with a solid track record of security and good customer support.
So do your research, compare different options before you commit.
Exactly. Don't just jump into the first one you come across. Security is paramount in the crypto world, so make sure the exchange you choose has a good reputation.
Right, because we've all heard those horror stories about people getting hacked or scammed.
And those stories, unfortunately, are often true. That's why I always recommend storing your Bitcoin in a personal wallet rather than leaving it on an exchange.
So you buy it on the exchange, but then you transfer it to your own wallet for safekeeping.
Exactly. It's like having your own digital vault. And if you're serious about holding Bitcoin for the long term, a hardware wallet is the way to go.
Those are the physical devices, right?
Yeah.
Like a little USB stick that stores your Bitcoin offline.
Exactly. It's the most secure way to protect your investment from online threats.
Okay, so we've got education, choosing an exchange, securing your Bitcoin. Anything else we need to keep in mind?
Well, when it comes to actually buying Bitcoin, I always recommend starting small. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Especially with something as volatile as Bitcoin, right?
Exactly. Dollar cost averaging is a good strategy. That means you invest a fixed amount at regular intervals, regardless of the price.
So you're not trying to time the market or predict when Bitcoin is going to go up or down.
Right. It's a disciplined approach that can help you build your holdings over time without taking on too much risk.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's zoom back out for a moment and revisit those geopolitical questions we touched on earlier. We talked about Russia potentially using Bitcoin to evade sanctions. Is this something we're likely to see more of?
It's a real possibility. Bitcoin's decentralized nature makes it attractive to countries that are looking to operate outside of the traditional financial system.
So it's not just about individual freedom and financial independence. It's becoming a tool for nations to assert their autonomy.
Exactly. And we're already seeing other countries explore the potential of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies more broadly. Some are even considering adopting Bitcoin as legal tender.
Wow, so it's really starting to shake things up on a global scale.
It is, and the implications are huge. We're talking about a potential shift in the balance of power, both economically and politically.
So it's not just about the price of Bitcoin going up or down. It's about the potential for a fundamental restructuring of the global financial system.
That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating and a little bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, the stakes are high. But that also means the potential rewards are huge, right?
Absolutely. This is a transformative technology with the power to reshape our world in profound ways. And the best part is, we're all witnessing it unfold in real time.
It's history in the making, and we're all part of it. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bitcoin accumulation, let's leave our listeners with some final thoughts. What are the key takeaways? What should people be thinking about as they navigate this new and evolving landscape?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that knowledge is power. The more you understand about Bitcoin, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions about your own financial future.
Education is key, right? Don't just blindly follow the hype or the fear. Do your research, understand the risks and the potential rewards.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. There's a whole community of people out there who are passionate about Bitcoin and willing to share their knowledge.
It's a learning journey, and we're all in it together. And ultimately, whether you choose to embrace Bitcoin or not, it's a force that's shaping our world, and it's not going away anytime soon.
That's for sure. The future is unfolding before our eyes, and it's up to each of us to decide how we want to participate in it.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin accumulation. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. And remember, the choices we make today will determine the world we inherit tomorrow.
Yeah, a lot of potential upsides for sure. One of the biggest ones is this idea of financial inclusion. Think about it. Millions of people around the world, they don't have access to traditional banking.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's a huge problem.
It is, it really is. But Bitcoin, it could change that. It could give those people a way to participate in the global economy even without a bank account.
So it's like a financial equalizer in a way, giving everyone a chance to get in the game.
Exactly. And then there's the whole inflation hedge thing. Especially in countries with weak currencies, people are turning to Bitcoin to protect their savings.
Yeah, we've seen that happening in places like Venezuela, Argentina, where their own money is basically worthless.
It's sad, really. But Bitcoin, it offers them a lifeline, a way to preserve their wealth when everything else is falling apart.
So it's not just about getting rich. It's about survival for some people.
In many cases, it absolutely is. And let's not forget about the potential for faster, cheaper cross-border transactions. Think about sending money overseas right now. Those fees are crazy.
Yeah, it's painful. So with Bitcoin, you're saying it could be much more efficient.
Way more efficient. No more waiting days for transfers to clear, no more outrageous fees. It could revolutionize the way we move money around the world.
It's pretty exciting stuff when you think about it.
Yeah.
But let's not get carried away. You mentioned some potential drawbacks earlier, things we need to be cautious about.
Right. Volatility is the big one. Bitcoin's price can swing wildly, which makes it hard to use for everyday transactions.
Yeah, imagine trying to buy groceries when the price of Bitcoin could drop 10% while you're in line.
Exactly. It's not very practical, at least not yet. And while the technology itself is decentralized, the exchanges and companies operating within the Bitcoin ecosystem, they're not.
So there's still a level of centralization which opens the door to potential problems, right?
Exactly. Regulation is still a big question mark, and there are definitely concerns about things like manipulation and fraud. We need to find the right balance between fostering innovation and protecting consumers.
It's a tough challenge for sure, but it's a challenge we need to address head on. We can't just ignore the potential risks.
Agreed. The stakes are too high, but I'm optimistic that we can find a way to harness the power of Bitcoin while mitigating the risks. It's going to require collaboration between governments, regulators, industry leaders, and the Bitcoin community as a whole.
It's a global conversation, and we all need to be part of it.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. Bitcoin is forcing us to rethink our fundamental assumptions about money, finance, power. It's challenging the status quo and forcing us to consider alternative possibilities.
It's a paradigm shift, for sure. Whether Bitcoin ultimately succeeds in becoming this dominant form of currency or not, it's already sparked a global revolution.
I think that's a key point. We're witnessing history in the making. Bitcoin is pushing us to ask big questions about the future of money, the future of society, and those are conversations we need to be having.
They are. And ultimately, those conversations, the choices we make today, they're going to shape the world of tomorrow. That's the power we have, and we shouldn't take it lightly.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive into Bitcoin accumulation, it's really just the beginning of a much larger conversation.
Exactly. We've explored the trends, the potential, the risks, the implications. But the journey's far from over. In fact, it's just getting started.
And we're all along for the ride.
That's right. So to everyone listening, keep learning, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep those conversations going. The future is being written as we speak, and we all have a role to play.